Gentleman yields back. Chair thanks the gentleman. The gentlelady from Wyoming is recognized.
Chairman Burgess, Ranking Member McGovern, and members of the Rules Committee, thank you for allowing me to testify on proposed rule changes for the 119th Congress. Excuse me. Today, I would like to speak on my proposed rule change, which would amend House Rule 21, restrictions on certain bills, to add a new Clause 13, preventing the House from considering legislation unless the measure has a sunset provision. Sunset provisions automatically terminate the legislation, discretionary appropriation, or program unless Congress renews or reauthorizes to continue beyond a fixed period of time. As a freshman member of Congress, I have learned, largely to my horror, how many unauthorized government agencies, offices, and programs exist, and watched as controversial authorities extend in perpetuity, limiting reform opportunities. I believe this proposed rule change will make Congress a more professional body and make the executive branch more accountable to the legislature as intended, as it will require ongoing oversight and review of authorities, programs, and spending in order to determine whether they should continue as is, be modified, or be terminated in their entirety. Under our current system, programs and authorities have avoided congressional scrutiny simply because they exist, again, essentially into perpetuity. Even when concern about a particular program, agency, or spending priority is raised by our members, the status quo of doing business, calendar constraints, political will, and outside influences often prevent Congress from doing its job. If we as the lawmakers are subjected to a routine and ongoing scrutiny and what essentially amounts to performance review through elections, then so should the authorities, programs, and agencies we create. Our discretionary spending should surely be subject to such ongoing review. House Rule 10, Clause 21 lays out the general oversight responsibilities of the Standing Committee to analyze, quote, the application, administration, execution, and effectiveness of federal laws, end quote. And, quote, conditions and circumstances that may indicate the necessity or desirability of enacting new or additional legislation, end quote. Clearly, it is Congress that is intended to conduct this routine oversight. In light of our historical failure to do so, however, using sunset provisions as I am proposing could resolve the issue. Congress should have ongoing and routine oversight of the authorities, programs, executive offices, and spending that we approve, even when there is broad congressional support for such programs, etc. Oversight is an integral part of the legislative process, and routine reform is how we prevent or control issues long before they develop into a significant problem. During the 118th Congress, the House Energy and Commerce Committee provided a great example of how this could work when it unveiled a discussion draft of a bill to sunset Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. Section 230 is well known to our members these days, and while we all have different ideas for how it should be reformed, I would argue that there is a general consensus among our members and their constituents that some action is needed. I seriously doubt that the social media companies would have so readily censored conservative speech had Section 230 been subject to periodic congressional review. A sunset would require Congress, as part of the process of extending the authority, to work the policy through its committees of jurisdiction, where oversight and reform ideas could be proposed. This would then tee up the entire House to vote on whether to reform and or extend an authority which has not been subject to substantive reform since its creation in 1996. An example of a sunset clause working relates to Section 702 of the FISA Act. Because it had a sunset provision, Congress was able to implement several substantive reforms this year in order to prevent the FBI and other federal agencies from abusing the FISA court and process, such as what was discovered as part of the Russia collusion hoax. Sunset clauses require Congress to do its job. Routine consideration of extending authorities, appropriations, and programs would ensure Congress takes ongoing responsibility for addressing the important issues of the day, while also providing members with more opportunities to shape policy and govern other than through a handful of must-pass bills that are not subject to proper process or consideration. Adding a sunset requirement for bills Congress considers will only strengthen this body and contribute to efforts to make Congress a more professional and accountable body to the people. Thank you again, Chairman Burgess and Ranking Member McGovern, and I yield back.